down and thought, ooh, where's my right foot? And I thought, you know what? I have two little kids and I've got work today. I've got no time to be dying. So that's not happening.
So, welcome to the mental space. Now, picture this if you can. You're out running and you are hit by a car and flung 30 feet through the air. When you land, you are close to death. Follow that with 20 operations. I'm delighted to say that my guest here on the mental space today is more than alive and kicking. If there was ever a bionic woman, she is her. Please welcome to the mental space Laura Everest, who is a leadership productivity specialist. And Laura, your story is absolutely amazing and inspiring, but can you take us back to that day? Because it feels like it shaped so much that's followed since in your life.
Hello, thank you for inviting me today. Yes, okay, I can't believe it's 9 years already. I can't believe where the time's gone. So I used to be one of these happy runners. I would run maybe about 60, 70 kilometers a week, have done most of my life. And I was just out one morning before work on a normal run and was obviously hit by a car when I was crossing. I'd kind of got most of the way through my run. And yeah, I was hit. I thankfully don't remember being hit, but I do remember waking up as such, lying in the road and thinking, if I'm lying here, then obviously I've been hit. Why else would I be here? And, you know, as you do, I just kind of looked down and thought, let's just take stock here. Lots of people around me. And I looked down and thought, ooh, where's my right foot? And thought all I could just see is the two bones in my ankle sticking up like a rude sign. And my foot was actually, it was just about attached by a little bit of skin, but the toe of my foot was on the road the wrong way around, so completely off. I hadn't really realised what was up with my other leg, just that it was lying at a very, very strange angle, which wasn't normal. And apart from that, I hadn't really realised much else. But people were sort of saying, stay with me. And I thought, well, where do they think I could be going? I thought, oh my God, they think I'm going to die. And I thought, well, am I? And I thought, well, hang on. If I can think like this, there's obviously nothing wrong with my head. So that's a plus. Can move my neck. Yep. Back hurt. Okay, that's doable. And I thought, you know what? I have two little kids and I've got work today. I've got no time to be dying. So that's not happening. And I think my key thing is don't shut your eyes. If you don't shut them, nothing can happen. But I just had this overwhelming feeling that I would be fixed and it's fixable, but I needed to get a move on. And what amazed me is that, none of us know how we're going to react, right? I mean, we don't all have to face a horrible situation like this very often, if at all. But I was really interested to see that my mind moved immediately into focus zone. What do I need to do? I need to contact my husband. I need to make sure work know. I need to check on, the ambulance, blah, 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 blah. And so, I was being able to ask the people around me, what's happening? Can we phone this? Can we do that? And there was a wonderful woman who was right with me, who I was never able to find out who she was, but she was an amazing person trying to keep everything calm and what have you. And everything was just in situation. So I was there, but, I was looking around me and I thought, ooh, of all these people, I recognize somebody there. I think I've worked with that person before. And I kind of said, excuse me, have we worked together? And it's like, oh my God, I don't know who you are, don't pick me out. And I thought, oh, perhaps, I don't know why they don't get it. But looking back at the injuries I had later on and, rethinking, I imagine that he was absolutely horrified and I was possibly pretty unrecognizable because I'd done such a huge amount of damage. So really, from there, it was just off to the hospital, as quickly as I could.
I mean, my first reaction to that is, how could you have been so rational in that space? I mean, there was no panic. There was no, that checklist of, oh, okay, so this is all right and that's all right. Was that something that you knew about yourself before this, or is this something you discovered about the sort of decision-making process?
I think we don't know how we're going to react in these situations, quite frankly. And, I guess I surprised myself as well. I mean, I am an organizer. It's one of my key strengths.
Yeah.
And at home, there's a reason why I'm known as the Minister of the Interior. But, I was amazed what I did do in that time. And actually, no, I think probably there's adrenaline. So I wasn't feeling a vast amount of pain at that point. And I guess that also means, I don't know, I just felt I just have to focus and not get stressed out, because it is what it is. And there are people trying to do what they can. And I am determined I'm not dying today. And that's all there is to it. And with that mind made up to that degree, everything we do is a choice, right? So that was my first choice. And that's where it all started.
So that's the immediate after effect. The aftermath of the accident. Was there a point when the enormity of what actually happened to you did hit you and came home, or were you always, because I imagine the emotions must have gone up and down, but was there a point where you were like, and it really did hit you?
I think there were a couple of things. I think firstly, when I got to the hospital, and I think there were about 10 or 12 doctors in the emergency room with me. Obviously, one, I think about 3 or 4 of them were sewing my right foot back on. My left foot actually had completely turned the other direction. Bone had come out, ankle completely smashed, and it had lost pulse, which was a very big concern in terms of amputation and how long it's kind of, blood supply is locked off. So they had to turn my foot around, which was horrible. Then I had broken my left elbow and lost half my left lower arm at the time. And that was unbearable because they had to pour alcohol over it. And although it, may not have been as bad as some of the other things, that was excruciatingly awful. My hands both had swelled up like rubber gloves because I dislocated all my fingers, and my right wrist I had dislocated and was done. So there were loads of people buzzing around me. I'd obviously got a lot of, having been carried along a road. When you're in running shorts, they don't protect you very much. So I'd lost a lot of surface skin, and there was a lot of blood around, and I'd cut my head and my eyes and things. There was stitching. So I guess that kind of was, obviously done a lot more than I thought. But by then I was having medication, and it was making me a little, more sleepy. And I thought, just go with it, just do what I can. So that was one. When I came out of initial 9 hours of surgery, I had doctors and surgeons by my bed saying, do you know how lucky you are to be alive? Do you know that, we're lucky that we didn't amputate your feet? There was obviously huge concern that I would never walk again. They didn't know what to do with my arm. They thought I'd never be able to move it properly, etc. And so those were all times. And honestly, I think there was a lot to take in. And I think then, and there are certain periods over the recovery, obviously, that it sinks in and you feel terrible and awful. You can't help it. But I think the one thing that I have learnt and was very, very helpful to me is, don't focus ahead. You don't know. Let's just deal with what's right in front of me right now, tiny bits. And I think when any of us feel that we're ever really challenged and overwhelmed, I think it's a scary place. And what we need most is to be able to feel we've got some kind of control of our situation. So for me, you know, the only way I could think of it is what is in my power right now to control. Even if it's a tiny, tiny little thing, what am I in control of that just makes me feel in a better place? And that's how I kept building over the time. But there are obviously many times over, even recently after the 20th surgery again, you think, oh God, here I am again. Oh no, all comes back. Oh my goodness. And you hit the bottom of that swimming pool again, and you've got to kind of build yourself back up.
Again, so much to unpack. I mean, you seem innately strong, shall we say. How were your family in the aftermath of that? Because you're a mother, and you know that cannot have been easy for them. And then you have to be strong for them. Is that how it went? How did that happen? Or did they discover a resilience that is like a family trait almost?
Do you know what? I don't think any of us know how, as I said, how things are. As a mother, I was really, really anxious, and my husband made the decision to bring them into the high dependency ward to see me after the surgery. And I looked something like, you know, one of these Egyptian mummies, completely covered in head to foot and bandaging. But I think that was an important decision, and they were able to see without conjuring up their own idea. And even though it was terrible and I could hardly move, I said, I'm fine. I'm going to be fine. You're going to school tomorrow because mummy is going to be fine. There are people that are looking after me, and you're going to be okay. And I will be home very soon. So that was the first thing. How did they manage? Oh, it was such a worry for us all. Our son actually reacted he physically got sick for a few days. He had terrible stomach pain and was vomiting, etc. And then he was okay. Our daughter took it all on board very silently, and that actually had much, unfortunate, longer term issues with her mental health and how it affected her, because she was young enough at, I think, about 7 or 8, I think she was, something like that, maybe a little older, but not enough to tell us or to share. And I was trying to do my best to be as normal as I could for them. And it was really difficult to try and manage me as well as trying to manage them and praying I was doing the right thing. It's very, very difficult, very worrying as a parent.
So 9 years, 20 surgeries, and you wrote your book, Rebuilt to Last. How did you piece together, you know, both your family's mental health and your own physical recovery, and then stay so positive as you are, and as we've had conversations before? How did you kind of maintain that positivity, and how did you begin to put your life back together in what many people would say would be the darkest of circumstances?
I think if I take it back a little bit, I think sort of 3/4 of the way through, or around, I don't know how many surgeries I'd had, maybe about 13 surgeries, something like that. Or even before that, in actual fact, to be honest, I had, people were telling me, oh, you're so resilient. And I thought, I seem to be. And I thought, as somebody who's trained leaders and teams on resilience, and we think a lot of it as thinking positive thoughts and finding, a way to bounce back, I realized that was rubbish. And I thought, but what is it I'm doing? I ought to know what it is I'm doing, and why don't I? So I decided I actually took some time also to study positive psychology. I worked on resilience, learned optimism, and an array of different things. And I learned that there are definitely strategies that we need to use to help us. Everything we do is a strategy. And it's got to be a strategy that works with the way we think and we are. That's the first thing. And I was instinctively using a strategy to help me, which I found very interesting. So that was the first part. The second part is that I also realized I was introduced to Gallup-Clifton strengths, but basically about recognizing that we all naturally have a way of thinking and doing and talents that help us achieve everything we get done every day in our lives. And I think we're not always self-aware. We get so accepting of what we do. We don't always think about what we do well, and what's worked for us, because I think we often get caught up in what we can't do and what's not working. But by doing this kind of assessment and study and becoming aware of what my strengths were, or naming where they came from, I suddenly thought, well, of course that's right. Of course that's me. And I started realizing that actually I was using key talents that I have, in terms of I'm an achiever. So I'd set myself goals every day to do things. I'm a ranger. I was fixing and organizing different things that I could do. I was lots of different strengths, activator, getting things started, do things, seeing things through. So all of these different things, and I'm a maximizer, which means I'm only happy if it's the best, not prepared to settle with average. So all of these things, when I realized what they are, I realized I could use them more productively to help me and build a strategy that would work better to get me up to where I want to be. One of my key strengths is positivity. So that helps, because it means, it's not that you're a Pollyanna and you think life's just grand. It's that you are able to perhaps see the worst scenario. What would happen? My most recent thing is I could still have my left leg amputated. Yeah. And, that's looking at the worst scenario and saying, well, what would I do about that? Could I manage that scenario? And then saying, okay, but in the meantime, it's not amputated and there are things they can do. So life's got to be better. How do I manage it? So it's really putting those things in place. And when I wrote the book, it wasn't easy, because you have to go back and dig into some very uncomfortable times and revisit difficult scenarios, because it was also a whole story. So it was my story, and I faced other challenges. Our daughter was diagnosed with ADD and depression. My father, who was the center of my universe, just died like that overnight. So there were a lot of difficult things to manage, in addition to trying to work, being a mother, and going through surgery after surgery. And I had to readdress all those things in the book, which was tough. Part of it made me cry to write it. But I knew it mattered, because other people, out there listening to you or to us, or reading my book, whatever, we've all faced horrible challenges and things we have to get through. And I wanted people to feel that they could really connect with this, because it's real, right? We all have terrible things that happen one way or another for us. And I wanted people to realize that it's not about trying to be superhuman and having these strengths that make you amazing, bionic woman. I am just an average person, but have learned how to do certain things. And lots of other average people around us can do the same. And that's really what I was trying very, very hard to get across, and why I work so much now, with predominantly through business, with the leaders and teams, helping people, because I'm absolutely passionate about people recognizing where they can take control and feel in a much better space.
I don't want to take you too much back into the book and into that space, but were there things in there that surprised you, just how much they impacted you, or what really did bring those emotions back to the surface? What was that kind of darkest time for you? But also, again, you've got this natural resilience perhaps, but were there coping techniques? How do you bring yourself back from that? Does it, because you've gone through 20 surgeries, is that something where you almost develop a muscle memory, that you begin to see signs that you're actually going somewhere that's a bit darker, and you're able to snap yourself out of that? What's that process like?
Okay, so there were several things that I found terribly difficult. I think one of the key things in my book, apart from our daughter, there's two. One with our daughter going through her own terrible times, and having 2 nervous breakdowns in hospital while I was going through surgery. That was devastating, because as a parent, we want to feel that we can completely cosset our children and look after them and make sure they never suffer and hurt. And it's terrible when you feel that it's something you don't know how to deal with, and you're trying so hard to feel on top of things for yourself, managing your own pain, but desperately wanting to look after your child. So that was one very difficult space to deal with. I think another was certainly when my father died. It was so traumatic for me. I just had an ankle replacement, and following the surgery, I'd had because I've had so many surgeries, the surgeon says it's like, stitching tissue paper. So it just rips around and it's terrible. So healing for me is very hard. I have a lot of help with that and pain. And, at this time I was on so many medications and feeling absolutely awful. Yeah. And then when my father suddenly died as well, I honestly thought the bottom had gone from my world. And I remember there was just one day I lay in bed and I sobbed my heart out. And I just thought, I want to just drop to the bottom of the swimming pool and just stay there and I'm done. And there is that awful time. But, we all have times which just can be overwhelming. I think what you learn is I think the first thing that mattered for me in terms of getting myself back up, and there is no bounce. Anyone who talks about bouncing has never really had anything particularly upsetting, because when you're really traumatized or upset, it is absolute grit, focus and determination every blinking time to get yourself back up. Yeah. The only advantage is that if you have a strategy works for you, even though you're not feeling the love or anything, and if you reach out to that strategy, it does help you get back quicker. But it is hard. And I think the key thing for me is, before you develop a strategy of anything, you've got to have a purpose. Why do you want it? Why do you want to get better? What's your goal? And when you have that purpose, for me, I knew that I had the ability and taught myself. I got over something that people said was impossible. I'm beating history medically. I am helping others that couldn't necessarily help themselves before. I'm using my skills to make others better. And these were all things, this was my purpose. I thought, this is what I believe I'm here to do. I survived something that I shouldn't have survived. So why waste a blinking good accident? I might as well use those things and help others. And that has been a purpose that I've used every time I felt rubbish. I thought, come on, other people are struggling, get on with it. And it's just like an invisible rope that helps you tap into your strategy, tap into your strengths, and you just use that to keep yourself going.
So if we could come bang up to date, and I know you had a surgery recently, my question is kind of in two parts. One, what's that taught you? But then when you look at the world today, and we look at the world which we can see mental health is a crisis that's growing and will continue to grow. I think we've got fear, polarization and insecurity like we've almost never had. When you go particularly into the world of work, what is it you're seeing and what is it you're saying based on what you've learned from your experience?
I think the thing that I see, the key things that I've been contacted with, since I've had, I put myself out on social media, or I'm training, or through my book, whatever. Key things that are coming back to me are, firstly, that a lot of people are feeling overwhelmed right now. There's been the whole issue with the pandemic that's thrown people in ways that they'd never expected, from business, from money, to visas if they're here, to children's education. All of these things have been a worry. World crisis still causing, knock-on things for people even now. So a lot of overwhelm come out of the pandemic, and now there's, oh my goodness, we've got to catch up. And there's like, and everyone's on this hamster wheel of, I've got to keep going, I've got to do everything. No sleep, start early, work late, don't take a break, no life balance, you can't live like that. And a lot of people have got stuck into this I don't know how to get off. I don't know what to do. I don't know how I can take control. I feel paralyzed. Or, I see people who are saying, I've seen all my life, I've been a high flyer on paper, and now I've had time to stop. I'm looking and think, well, actually, this wasn't the purpose of my life. I'm really unhappy. It's not going anywhere. And what have I achieved then? And there's a horrible depression that's setting in. So these are kind of key things that I'm seeing at all levels, particularly at the very top of the organization.
Yeah.
Because obviously, the higher up you go, often the more isolated you feel. And more than that, you're kind of looked at as the parent. So now everyone's looking to you to set direction for everybody else. And you're still going through your own personal crises and issues as well. And so I think a lot of leaders have so much pressure on them to try and be everything for everybody. So what I like to try and do is work with senior leaders, with leadership teams particularly, because I think further down, I think leaders have got their teams back often, and I feel the leaders are the ones that possibly need the most help right now. And really, it's just to say, what? Stop. Let's just declutter this noise. Let's just break this down, and let's just figure out what you can do. Where do we all need to feel in control? What do we need to do to take that control back? And there's so many different ways we look at that. In terms of feeling, once you feel in control of your situation, it gives you the confidence to put tools in place and do different things. But you've got to feel that to start with, because when you're at as I know, feeling like you're at the bottom of that swimming pool, you just feel completely overwhelmed. And it's so difficult to know which direction to move in or how to actually get forward.
Yeah, I was having a conversation yesterday about the male menopause of all things, which is not which is less of a physical manifestation in men between 40 and sort of 55, and it is all, or 95% of it, to do with a sort of a mental health crisis. We call it the midlife crisis, but it is a mental health, and it's to do with the anxiety, it's to do with the stress, it's to do with being trapped in roles, it's about not sure about your purpose. Now, if we throw in today as well, we've got leadership. It really does feel tough at the top, because the skills required to be a leader today, particularly because of the pandemic, when we talk about, it used to be chief executive officer, just deliver the profit, that's it. And now they're expected to be chief empathy officer. All of a sudden, they're supposed to have emotions and be an inspirational leader. And there's many people who got to the C-suite who are just not wired that way, or don't think they're wired that way. So how do they're almost like looking at the foundations of their careers disappearing like rapidly. It's like they're in quicksand, because all of a sudden the things they knew so well don't work anymore, and they're being rejected by the Gen Zs and the millennials. So I suppose my question, this should be a question rather than a statement, is what do you say to leaders who I imagine they're turning to you because they recognise there is something that they need to do. So what are those first steps for them?
I think the first thing I've had, and this is actually, I have a real issue, because so many places all around everywhere, this wonderful word of got to have empathy. And I just need to make it really clear that empathy is a strength. It is about feeling what other people feel. You've either got that talent or you haven't. I haven't got it. And a lot of us haven't. And so when people say as a leader, you've got to build empathy, most people come to me and say, I don't do that. I can't do it. What am I going to do now? I've got all these teams and they're not even in the office. They're all over the place. What the heavens am I going to do? And really, it's about, I try to turn that around and say, actually, it's about talking about how we build compassion. And we all can build compassion. We've just got to understand our style. There is not a group love thing that we've all got to suddenly be if it's not natural to us. But we just need to understand what is our natural style of doing things. And, it could be that we're really good listeners. It could be that we're great problem solvers. It could be that we are, there's so many different ways in which we connect with people. But it doesn't have to be all softly, soapy, cuddly. And that's what people are frightened of. It's just understanding if you are somebody that's a brilliant listener, that's an excellent way to start asking your team questions. What is it, that this, tell me about X, Y, and Z. Listen and start saying, okay, here's how I can help. Or seeing what's not aligned. I see this, I hear this, let's talk about what we can do. So there's so many different ways in which we can build compassion that isn't about this love and group hugs, which people, I think, particularly men, can get quite uncomfortable with. And it's just allowing people to recognize what is their natural way of thinking. How do they get these things done? Most people have a family and have friends, so they do have compassion. They do build friendships. They do build rapport and relationships. So what is their style in doing that? And how do we use that style in their authentic way to get done the things they need with their teams?
You've been very generous with your time. I'm going to ask one last question before I let you go, which is, okay, so what's the first step? What's the first step? Oh, obviously, reach out to Laura. But what is the first step that leaders, or indeed all of us, can take if we want to, if we recognise we need to make a change? Or what should be on the lookout? So what's the alarm bell that goes, yeah, actually, I do need to make a change?
I think, if most people feel stress all the time, and I think if you're somebody that is feeling really stressed, or you're feeling I'm not in control of the things I want to be in control of, I'm not creating a balance. How many people say to me, I wish I had more time with my family or with my friends, or I'm burning the candle at both ends. If this is you, or you feel you're on this constant treadmill or hamster wheel, then this is the first thing. Take stock. That's not right. It's not normal. You do not need to live your life like that. You do not need to give yourself an early heart attack, or a lot of, anything that's mentally stressful obviously will come out physically as well. Nobody needs that. So if you know that that's you, that's the first thing. You need to change that. You need to get off, press stop, and then let's figure out a way to reset that works for you.
And at that point, I am going to press stop and say thank you, Laura, for joining us on the Mental Space. Inspirational to talk to you. I look forward to talking more in the coming weeks. Thank you very much.
Fabulous. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Scott. Bye.